been a year since we last spoke, Ajay. How have you been and what have you been up to?
All great. I've just been in this journey of XKDR Forum. We began in 2020. The MCA registration date is 2021. Now we are in 2024. So we finished 3 full years. There is an old Gujarati saying that if you've built an organization and it has lasted for 1,000 days, then you've got something going. So yeah, we've crossed 1,000 days. It's been very hard, but also very satisfying that we've got a nice organization up and running.
What has been the hard part?
It's very difficult to find the resourcing for interesting intellectual work. So the Indian funding landscape is tough, and so we've struggled on finding that middle, finding the sweet spot. There's a cute little Venn diagram which you may have seen before. For every organization, there are 3 circles. Okay, so there is one circle of what we know how to do. There's a second circle of what we like to do, and there's a third circle of what we are able to get paid to do.
Mm-hmm.
So you're gold when you're able to put all the 3 together, where there is a resourcing strategy and we know how to do it well and we're good at doing it. And it's a very small set in India of finding those pieces together. In terms of the internal side of building the team and the processes and all that, I have lived in government style organizations all my life. Okay, so I was in the Indira Gandhi Institute, I was at the Ministry of Finance, I was at the NIPFP. I had internalized their ways of working. So, at an intellectual level, I might often think this makes no sense. But I just got used to it. And, you just normalize all their rules and procedures and limitations and constraints. Whereas here we are a brand new private non-profit organization. And it was actually a delight to be able to think from scratch about a lot of these things. And I have to say, sometimes it took us time to wake up and say, you know what, we can do whatever we like.
Yeah.
That's different from the way we have been indoctrinated all our life into the rules and procedures of a government organization. So that was also a little bit of a discovery. But we've done these things many times before. So in a way, we knew how to do this. So on the internal side, we knew how to hire people, build teams, build processes, generate intellectual capability, chip away day after day on the journey to intellectual capability. Those were things that we knew how to do. The really novel and difficult thing was how to find the resourcing so as to be able to sustain this as a non-profit organization operating in the Indian landscape.
Do you think most of what you learned in these government organizations was something you had to discard, or is there something that is quite unexpectedly remained with you, which has served you well even here? Is there anything like that?
So in the non-profit world, the nature of human resource contracts is quite tame. Okay, so in economics we use the words high-powered incentives and low-powered incentives. In high-power incentives, there is like equity and options and bonuses and those kinds of things, and those are not present too much in the governmentish world also, and they are not present much here also. So in that respect, this is very much the culture and the DNA of the intellectual world, where wages are relatively predictable. There is not much of a high-powered incentive, and wages are relatively low. So in that, it's more like the government organizations. In almost everything else, it is thought afresh. So many simple basic things like making a pantry work correctly and having the interiors of an office be done correctly. These are not hard, and the government organizations have phenomenal levels of resourcing, but they are not doing that, or they are not able to do that.
What is something that XKDR is not doing and something that you think that the organization is potentially overlooking? What is that one area of research or potentially a couple of areas that you're not focusing on, which you maybe should?
So can I break it into 2 different ways to approach the same question? One is fields, okay? And the other is a more meta conception of the kinds of work and the role one plays in society. Okay, so I feel these are two ways to approach that identical question. What would one like to do but is not happening? I feel that what we have not been able to do is play at the foundations of the Indian development strategy in the issues like growth, the development of the economy, the emergence of a capable, sophisticated private sector, the environment and the incentives under which private sector capability can evolve in India, studying the firms and the financial system and the globalization. Okay, so I think of that as one whole bag of knowledge, which is Indian development strategy, and I'm just a little unhappy that we do that on the side pro bono. We try to nurture that curiosity and we try to keep some of that work alive, but fundamentally we have not been active in that field. I would say we are like curiously nibbling at that field but not doing it a whole lot, and I wish we could do it a lot more. In terms of the nature of the work and the work products, Renuka Sane of Trustbridge has an interesting classification scheme. Okay, so her worldview is that the knowledge organizations of India have fallen into certain categories, and this is her classification scheme, and I think it's a pretty good classification scheme. So category 1 are the education organizations, okay, where their main product is they're running an undergraduate program or a master's program. Okay, you have attended one such of the great educational institutions of India, and they have their place, they have the contribution. I don't at all want to belittle it. So there, the DNA of the faculty is education. They're doing courses, they're teaching courses, they are bringing up young people, and that's great. In the modern world, many of these organizations tend to think about rankings and journal publications, and in the humanities and the social sciences, that works rather poorly because the entire journals process is so messy and so distorted. The best journals are abroad, and it's just odd and weird when people in India are redesigning their life strategy and research strategy to fit the journal objectives of journals abroad, and also the journal process in the social sciences and the humanities doesn't work so well. It was designed in STEM, science, technology, engineering, medicine. It was designed in STEM. It works for STEM, where a paper is a clear question and a clear answer. In the humanities and social sciences, the very concept of a narrow journal paper tends to be limiting because you're then not often asking important questions and big questions. But that's one vertical, which is the educational institutions who on the side are pursuing the foreign journals. Okay, then there is a second piece, who are the consulting organizations. Okay, so the consulting organizations work closely with government, and once again, I don't mean any disrespect that there is a collapse of state capability in India. The HR in government is broken, and elementary office competence in a lot of government organizations is lacking, and the private sector is filling the breach. And I say great. Okay, so there are many private organizations who are performing this staffing role or HR role, or they are an HR contractor to the government, or they are a consultant to the government. So there's like this spectrum of possibilities, but these are the consulting organizations. So it could be EY or KPMG, and there are many such organizations, but basically they are obeying the specific TOR written by a government organization, and the government organization does not ask them to think, it asks them to execute. So there's a precise definition of what is sought to be done, and the private organization that delivers on these roles don't have a life of the mind of their own. They work on consulting assignments. So it depends on the nature of the assignment. When the project is on, they're working on that project. The day the project ends, they exit. They are not after thought leadership. They're not after intellectual leadership. They're not producing materials that go out into the public domain and reshape the climate of opinion. They are serving the client, And more power to them. I don't at all mean to disrespect this. It's an important role. Given the collapse of state capability in India, such organizations are very important. Very often these are like relatively young employees who bring a Indian elite capability of hard work, of being able to uh, speak and write sound English, of being able to use modern computer software. Okay, these are unique capabilities that are often lacking in Indian state organizations. So they bring a professional polish and a finish to the work of their government client of a level that would not have been feasible working with mainline civil servants in India, where the Indian elite has largely not participated in sending their children through civil service exams and going into government. And there has been a very new evolution of the nature of people inside government in the last 20 years. So that is category 2, that they are the consulting stroke human resource firms who are supplanting the deficiencies of human capabilities inside government organizations, who take instructions and do work. They are sort of non-tenured employees attached to government in some fashion. So that's category 2. And then that leaves a hole in the third area, which is primary knowledge production. Okay, so finally, I think a person like you and a person like me, we see the great passion of the world as being the question of primary knowledge production. Okay, the great question of the world is to stand there every day and understand the world and understand how the world evolves, and to figure out deep truths about the world, and to be able to ask the important questions about the world and chip away at making progress on figuring out the world. And that is a bit of a gap in the Indian ecosystem. And my misgivings about XKDR Forum is we are partially there, but I would like it if we were there much more, and I wish we could do more. And somewhere in all this, I think I have said to you earlier that one of our organization concepts is that we just want to be small. We want to be 20 people. And this comes from the attempt at an intense artisanal experience. So I feel that the people should deeply collaborate with each other. The people should deeply know each other. We should impinge on each other's minds. And that comes in a small organization. So it's a very deliberate attempt at staying small so as to pursue excellence and to be good for the intellectual and cultural development of each person. So we see it as a learning journey, we see it as a growth journey for each person. But then that requires small number of people, in my opinion. And I get told by many people that this is our failure as managers. And we are so bad in management that we don't know how to do it on a bigger scale. But this is our current view, that we think that we can create the best energy and excitement and passion and the culture of knowledge and the commitment to knowledge and high human capabilities in an environment of good human camaraderie by keeping it small. And that has its own consequences, which is, we're small. We're not particularly big and influential. We don't have a footprint in many, many fields, and that will inevitably flow. So these are trade-offs to think about, that it could potentially be a bigger organization. There would then be much more of a funding treadmill. And also I feel that something would be lost in the character of the everyday shop floor life of camaraderie and intellectual excellence.
Are you open to expanding, or are you dead set on 20?
Currently our mood is 20. I just want to make it work. And in the future we can think about how to do it differently. But this is the theory of this organization. At this scale, the attempt is that we are small, we have limitations of funding. How do you make it good? So we're just not raging against our limitations of saying our self-imposed limit of 20 or our limitations of the funding environment, and just we wake up every day and wonder how can we do this better, and we chip away day after day trying to grow the knowledge and improve the processes and think through checks and balances and internal incentives, but above all, always and always, the knowledge, the knowledge, the knowledge. How do you grow knowledge? How do you gain knowledge? What are the new things we can learn every day? And how do we get better and better at doing this?
So you just said that one thing that you feel amiss in XKDR is that you are practically nibbling at the Indian development story, or the whole narrative of how do you bring India forward, which
Yes.
is basically what Karthik Muralidharan has tried to expound upon in his book we were just discussing. To that aspect, you also previously said that in a society like India, organizations such as this aren't valued very much,
Yes.
and that is reflected in terms of the funding that it gets.
Yes.
What kind of societies value organizations at XKDR, and can Indian society be such?
Yeah, I mean, it's part of the advanced economy package. To be an advanced economy is to be a land where truth and beauty are prized, and there is a whole ecosystem of intellectual achievement and truth seeking, and a whole community that is chipping away at understanding the society, the country, at diagnosing problems, proposing solutions, improving the knowledge landscape. And I also said beauty, which is the arts, that there is a resourcing for the arts. That's not happening a whole lot in India today, and that's part of the underdevelopment package. I want to talk about two things here, if you will permit me to digress. Um, One is that a lot of the philanthropy in India tends to be more around like building a school, building a hospital, and a simpler attributability that I did this. Whereas in a way, philanthropy can be the most amazing of all capital, because it can do risk taking, and it can support 1,000 flowers to bloom in terms of novel ideas and the imagination. And so philanthropy can be very cool things, but it depends on the people doing it. And we respect and value and admire the donors who are gifting their money away to make the world a better place, but then it's about their imagination and their conception of how they can add value to the society. The other thing is that I feel that I have this line of thought in terms of what the great universities of the advanced economies have learned to do. Okay, so whether you say Tokyo University or you say Oxford University, I feel that the best way to characterize the place of these universities in the society is around three pillars. The university seeks to create original knowledge in the society. The university diffuses knowledge into the society, both at the young level of like normal degree programs, but also in 100 other ways, including exec ed, including many other modern media and communication strategies to get knowledge out into the society. And the university gets involved and rolls up its sleeves and tries to make the world a better place. Okay, so these are the three prongs of the great universities of the world. And when you turn to the Indian environment, these three have not really coalesced into any single institution. So you sort of got undergraduate and master's level education being run in the educational institutions, and you've got some amount of primary knowledge production in the society, and there's not a whole lot of people participating in trying to make the world a better place. Okay, so the overall dream of the university is not embodied in single mainline important knowledge organizations in society, which is what you see in the first world, but that's lacking in India. And we in XKDR, we are tiny, we are a 20-man organization, okay, but we do think of these objectives. So building knowledge about the world, yeah, we do try to do that, and you'll see our website. We chip away doing novel work. We choose important questions. We are not controlled by the global journals in what questions we ask, and we create new knowledge about the world every day. So we have a steady flow of products where the most important characteristics are that here's an important question and I have added value by producing some new knowledge about an important question. So that's on the first pillar. And the second pillar is diffuse that knowledge into society. We have no educational program, so we don't have master's students and PhD students. But I do think that we're trying hard and we are making a little bit of a difference by way of diffusing knowledge into the society. Partly, as I said to you, the attempt here is that it's 20 people, but we really want to push to obtain the intellectual transformation of the people who go through this place. And we would like to believe that for each person who is here, we are supporting that person's journey to a quantum leap in their intellectual and cultural outlook. So we are growing people and we are creating a leadership cadre in the society, and that is similar to what we have done earlier at IGIDR or NIPFP. You see many of the individuals from those years who have gone on to do great things in India. So that is one kind of transmitting knowledge into the society. It's a learning by doing. It is an apprenticeship model, which I think works well. I'm not a great fan of lectures and exams as a way to learn. I think you learn better in a master apprentice model, in a learning by doing, by being in a community, by rolling up your sleeves and actually doing stuff. I feel that builds knowledge. Then we are trying to do a whole bunch of these modern media concepts through which you can diffuse knowledge into the world. Okay, so there is a XKDR YouTube channel. We publish articles in the Lib blog. We write some amount of op-eds in the newspapers. Amit Verma and I are building a weekly YouTube 1 hour show, which is Everything is Everything, things like that. So I think these are ways in which you diffuse knowledge into the world, and learning is a lifelong journey. So, we know very well that with what you do by way of an undergraduate degree is really very, very little in terms of the overall package of knowledge and culture that is required to navigate life. And so I think constantly participating in this life of the mind in India is a good thing, and we try to do it in our own small way. In terms of participating in making the world better, we do this in a limited way through some amount of collaborations, and it's like we have collaborators who are doing important things in participating in making the world better and fixing problems in the world, and we support them and we participate in their work. We don't do a whole lot of that right here.
I have two questions following up from that. One is, how do you choose which questions to ask firstly, which topics to go for? Because everything is a trade-off. You
Yes.
choose one question to answer, you are choosing to answer n minus that question.
Yes.
So what is the calculus that goes behind choosing what to focus on? And second, what is an average day in XKDR member's life looks like? I would assume that, okay, there are projects that people are working on.
Yeah.
It's mostly research based. There isn't a lot of oversight. There's just collaboration. People talk to each other
Yeah.
and try to figure out. But I'm also assuming there must be some kind of deadline. So
Yeah.
give us a sense of that.
Yeah. So first on the prioritization and the triaging question. So these are of course very important. So let me start at one extreme, that if you are in the consulting DNA, the customer chooses, right? The client chooses. And many consulting type organizations have to actually be quite alive to the funding landscape, that there is money available for this kind of thing, and so we will reshape ourselves to go into that space. And in some ways they are an implementation arm of the priorities of the funders. And the funders are a variety of organizations in the world, either philanthropic or not, but basically they move with the winds of where the funding is going. So when a subject becomes fashionable, they will go there. When a subject becomes unfashionable, they will exit that space. So that is one kind of organization. Now we do need to get resourced and stay alive, and so funding is an important consideration, and we do cater to the problem of staying funded. And so that is undoubtedly a consideration, that we do need to have the minimum level of resourcing so as to be able to keep our small organization up and running. So that is one aspect of it. But apart from that, we think tactically and we think strategically. We think tactically that is there something interesting and important and useful in the world where we can be ready off the shelf, where we can be useful off the shelf. So there are capabilities here that are available, that are off the shelf. Then it's nice that we already know how to do it at a low marginal effort. We can add value to somebody's life by being able to do something. So that is a consideration, that this is something that we know how to do and we will go there and do it. But we do think a lot strategically. We think on a 5-year horizon, on a 10-year horizon, on a 25-year horizon. What are the important questions? What are the important capabilities? So partly we're making choices around questions, and partly we're making choices around capabilities, that you need this capability. And so we will try to find every opportunity to go closer to that capability. So I'll give you an example. We're very excited about alt data. Okay, that alt data is all the pathways through which you can observe India and the Indian economy and the Indian society without relying on a formal statistical system. So the conventional main line is either you have like government statistics or you have CMIE. Okay, and that's fine. They are there, and we use them to the hilt. We use all the great data that CMIE makes, and it's great. But beyond that, there's a whole new world opening up of alt data. As an example, satellite imagery. As an example, scraped data sets which are assembled by processing the great internet in various kinds of ways. Now we think that that's just phenomenally important. It's strategically important to be able to observe the world in better ways, either from a bird in the sky, which is satellite imagery, or to be able to create completely new data sets by scraping. So we said to ourselves, this is strategically important, and we will go there, and we will find every excuse to be there. So if we can find work that is even peripherally connected to alt data, we will say, look, this is strategic, that we want to go towards alt data. So we just keep trying to lean there. So we keep up a conversation all the time about what are the important fields, what is strategic, and then that's a bias and a priority to try to be in that space and hire people in that space, and keep some work alive, nurture the work stream even when it's not particularly funded. So what is it to not be a consulting organization is to have a sense of your own priorities. What is your life? What are the fields that you want to do, rather than being shaped by the funders at all times. So at one extreme is a consulting firm. For them, it's a gig, that there is a customer from this date to that date. You're paid for a 7-man team, and in that period you'll do that, and the day that ends you'll stop all the work. Whereas that's not how we behave at all. So we will often get paid to do a certain body of work for a certain time duration, but once the curiosity and the mind starts ticking, we'll just keep going. We keep on thinking and building and writing in that field for a long, long time. We will not stop there. And I have an amused story about this. So there was some small project, and at the end of that, the funder had an internal evaluation mechanism. And so there was a call which was like a closing conversation at the end of a project. And the funder asked a question. So there were just a whole bunch of practical questions and normal questions. What was your experience? Rate this from 1 to 5, all those things. But then there was one interesting question in that conversation. The funder, the post-project completion conversation had this one question. They asked, what did you do in the course of this project, or what will you do in this field that was unrelated to the list of things that were contracted? Okay, and I thought that is absolutely brilliant. That we're actually taking interest in this field. We're not just serving a contract. And in fact, we were able to show many interesting things that are kicking in our mind, where we went and did things, and we will go and do things that are in that space, but that's because of our energy and not the letter of the contract. So I thought that's an interesting demarcation, that what is the difference between a knowledge organization and a consulting organization? In a consulting organization, you've got a TOR, you've got a fixed contract, it begins, it ends, when it ends, it ends, and the team is really not there, and then the team moves on to do a next thing. And again, I don't mean to slam them. They're playing a very valuable role, particularly in the Indian landscape, given the difficulties of the Indian state. But that's different. It's not knowledge production. It's an HR service that you are getting Indian elite English-speaking competent people who know how to work with computers to overcome the staffing gaps of government organizations, and that's great. But we're a knowledge organization. I don't think you can produce knowledge on contract. I think that what's essential in knowledge production is the sense of curiosity and the imagination, and just being bitten by that bug, and your mind keeps chipping away and chipping away, and then the insight unfolds and the knowledge unfolds, and you can't predict when that will unfold, but we have to be alive to those possibilities. And then when ideas come, we should find the energy and the effort to continue to do work and build knowledge products and research products, even if they're not funded, because we are researchers. To be a researcher is to be curious and passionate and interested in the world, and not either be in the corporate ladder of getting the journal pubs in the foreign journals, or be a consulting firm where you're serving clients. Okay. But to actually have some interest and imagination and curiosity about the world, old-fashioned idealistic words, but I think that's the heart and soul of it, that you have to be curious about the world, you have to be interested in the world, and we have to have our own sense of a research journey, of questions, of answers, of the importance of certain questions, and of some distinctive methods through which we will approach those questions and try to make progress. Okay, then you asked about what is life inside the organization. You should really ask these questions of the people in the organization, but we don't do intensive management. We do have management. So there are projects, there are dates, deadlines, and there is hard work, but it's not an intensive management system, and we don't run high-powered incentives. The work is very difficult for most people. So most people who come into this organization do have to reinvent themselves considerably.
Why do you say so?
Because there is a very huge gap between normal educational institutions, whether in India or abroad, and the actual life of doing research. So there's a lot of knowledge building and capability building that has to happen here, and people who are interested in reinventing themselves will. And then there is just an amazing toolkit here. There's a knowledge base here that I think is the secret sauce. It is the entire spectrum of pieces that go into how we understand the world. It includes quantitative techniques, statistics, data science, alt data, the databases that we have, the way in which we know how to process data and study the world, but then going on into more of humanities and social science, terrain, the whole machinery, the toolkit you have seen in the book that Vijay Kelkar and I wrote about how to think about the state, to think about the state around problems of public choice theory, checks and balances. So you know that compared to most economists, we do much more law and public administration, because actually laws are the DNA, laws are the code that sets a government agency up and running. And so it is supremely important to understand laws and think deeply about laws and think about incentive implications. As you know well, at law school, people are taught, here's the section of the law, here's how to write contracts around it, here's how to litigate around it. We turn this upside down and we apply our minds to asking the question, what should this section be? And that's a completely different skill. And there is no connection at all between the skill of writing contracts or rendering legal advice or litigating versus the skill of thinking about what would alternative designs of this section be, and what kind of legal effects would they induce, and how do they reshape the incentives for how the world works. And the moment I use the word incentives, that's economics, that's a different kettle of fish. Then the whole toolkit of thinking about market failure and government organizations and public choice theory, that's a whole remarkable toolkit that has happened inside this organization, and it's our distinctive lens through which we know how to look at the world. So that's a whole bag of capabilities that you will recognize are not present either in college education or in a conventional office job in India or in the consulting organizations. So when people have grown up in a consulting organization, they're not ready for this kind of work that we do. So there's quite a learning curve for people to come in, and once again, it depends on the energy and the passion that if people have that kind of excitement about building this knowledge and reinventing themselves, then it works to be here. If people feel they already know how to turn a wrench, then probably this place doesn't quite fit. And then it's a 20-man organization, so you don't need a whole lot of formal management and project management and machinery. We also try to constantly play at two levels. One is the practical work of a project that's being done, but then what intellectual leadership are we doing? So try to zoom out and think from first principles about what is this work, how is it being done, are we adding value, are we doing something novel, are we doing something unique that nobody else would have thought of, are we on the right track intellectually, philosophically, as opposed to just fitting a contract and getting a job done. So we walk at both tracks, which is in terms of high ideas, adding value, doing something nice and well, and then at the practical level of sitting down and doing implementations. There's a whole lot of writing documents and writing computer programs and getting things done.
You have a system by which you make sure that whatever you just described, that keeping the organization on track, zooming out, making sure that you're not missing out on the mission of the organization, and also being able to understand, are we progressing on, say, the various projects that we're doing. Is there a system that is like every 6 months?
Mildly system. The biggest secret sauce is 20 people.
Why 20? Why not 30?
Fair enough. I mean, you can argue about that. But basically, when it's a small organization, these things are easier. When it becomes a large organization, it becomes very difficult. So I say this with an almost reverential respect that it's very hard to build and run large organizations well. In large organizations, there are so many problems. There are principal agent problems where the incentives of the individuals and various work groups diverge from the vision and the goal of the institution, and that's just normal. That's inevitable in human nature, and all management is about trying to reduce the gap between the objectives of the organization and the objectives of the individuals inside the organization. I often say that the role of the CEO of an organization, of a normal for-profit organization, the role of a CEO in an organization is to wage war against the organization in representing the interests of the customers. Because most organizations are just a law unto themselves, that organizations look to their own limitations and try to live inside their happy zone. We know how to do this, we don't know how to do this, we will just keep on doing this, and we don't care about the external world. And the job of leadership is to kick the organization internally and say, no, like you need to do the things that are consistent with the organizational objectives and what fits the chosen place of that organization in the world. All these things are easy when you're a 20-man organization. So I don't particularly say we have a system, but yeah, we do think about it, and there is a quiet debate all the time about what should we be doing, what should we not be doing.
And this is a very ancillary question, you don't have to spend a lot of time on it. I'm just wondering, is the 20 or just the fact that you prefer a small organization a bias because you don't want to manage larger individuals, or is it because of all of the reasons you said that you completely...
No, it's more harsh than that. It's because you don't know how to handle larger organizations. I look back at my NIPFP years and I do have some red flags going off at certain points where I felt the management of the organization was not so great. So I'm applying that. And so here for right now, we are saying to ourselves that let's keep it sub 20 and concentrate on how to become amazing while being 20. Okay, so just it's a constructive project. How can we do 20 well? Maybe in the future that can change. I'm not wedded to it, but I find it a good way to define the problem, that stay small. You don't have to be world changing. You don't have to have very high levels of impact, but produce an amazing organization with really remarkable people, with well incentivized, energetic, curious people, build a good culture, build a nice intellectual and a public service type culture.
As someone who is influencing, if not directing, the organization, what are outcomes that you optimize for? I mean, of course, the aim is to produce research that gets results, that gets the outcomes. B, I think there is also a very strong current of making sure that the people in the organization grow intellectually and with each other. Yeah. What are the outcomes that you think to yourself are the things that I want to fulfill via this?
So I think the mission statement is to build knowledge and build community. And if we can, create important knowledge about the world and Sometimes it is world facing, so it shows up on the XKDR website. Many times it's not, but it is our close working with many collaborators where we are adding value to their life by bringing knowledge to help them do certain things better. Then we take great satisfaction that we are helping. And we are not doing staffing roles, we are not doing consulting, we're always doing knowledge roles. And so that's the sense of purpose around building knowledge. It's a good thing to build knowledge where either it goes out as world facing, and I feel that there's just not enough happening in India in terms of the journey of building knowledge. So every small organization that can add to the knowledge construction is a good thing. And we are one small organization that is adding value in that space. And the other is to build community, to build each person, to build the culture, to build capability, to support and sustain the curiosity of people and grow their capabilities and culture.
Was there anything, I mean, it's been close to 4 years that you've been running XKDR. Were there issues that were unprecedented, issues that took you by surprise when you began to run this organization?
Not too much. It was a long journey to figure out how to establish the resourcing. That was quite hard, and it was different from anything we've done before. So to get up and running to the minimum level of capability where there is a team and there is some resourcing capability, that was truly hard. In terms of the internals, no, there was nothing that was truly new and hard, just doing things better than ever before. So we always knew how to do these things. Partly one is growing up and doing them better, and partly free of the limitations of the government organizations, one can do the same things better. So it was more an intensification of things that were done previously. So in a way, many people here have had a lifetime of doing these kinds of things before, and that way it was possible for them, for all of us to come together and do that again.
I'm really interested to understand, in a, again, knowledge organization, which it's not a consultancy, there's no project-based lifespan that I will do 8 projects this year and I will completely do those projects well enough, etc. It's a much more, I wouldn't say vague, but much more abstract environment of working, because you're constantly choosing new things to do. You're constantly reinventing those things while you're working on them. So there aren't very clearly established objectives.
Yes.
How do you not get frustrated because there aren't clear outcomes and you can't always see tangible outcomes of your work? How do you manage to motivate yourself?
Yeah. So I think a lot about the DNA of a research organization. In a research organization, I think that to the true researcher, the moment of passion is the instant at which you get new ideas, and the joy of creation, the joy of invention, that you come up with a new idea, you feel good that here's a new idea, that it works well. And that's the energy that keeps it going. And again, it's a culture, and it is a self-selection of certain kinds of people who show up and become part of this kind of journey. It's not directed around maximizing income, because then that would be a very different kind of organization.
That's a trade-off you chose much earlier.
So then, we have limitations on the resourcing, but we try to keep up the life of the mind and build knowledge and find pleasure and pride in coming up with new ideas and inventing things and figuring out the world and thinking deeply about the world.
You've said multiple times that at XKDR you try to do novel work, or at least approach it much debated issues in a novel way.
Yes.
What is it that XKDR does well or exclusive, and like in tangible terms, that say most research places in India don't do? I mean, to my mind, a bunch of novel stuff that XKDR does is statistical. So I think, and you've also, like in our previous conversation, said that we don't flout on data. We understand data and we understand what it measures, and we try to measure the right things. So can you expand on the exclusivity of this place?
Yeah. So first, on the emphasis of novel, okay? It sounds trite and obvious, but to read what 20 people have done and to summarize that is not novel. Okay, so many people do that, and it has its place. There is a communications problem in the world where to pull well-known knowledge together in a communication strategy that caters to a situation or an audience is a good thing. I don't mean to belittle that. We have set ourselves the objective that we want to do novel. So we are always pushing that say something new. Okay, so as an example, lots of people write newspaper op-eds, and very often a newspaper op-ed is sort of a representation of some interesting ideas that are swirling. Whereas I often challenge myself that if I'm writing an op-ed, in my mind I get intimidated thinking that I want my readership to be the smartest people in the country, and they already know tons of things. So how do I lay claim to asking for 10 minutes of their time to read my Monday morning Business Standard article? And the answer is I have to have something new to say. You can't just say things that other people already know. So you have to come up with a new idea. Every single Monday I set myself the challenge that say something new. And that's the emphasis on the word novel. Similarly, in the work at XKDR, so we have a whole internal rhythm of writing, that you're writing a blog article, you're writing a working paper. So for example, we have this very nice collaborative thing going on with Agami and with two other organizations where we are running a monthly legal systems seminar. I think we are on number 8 taking place, I think tomorrow or the day after. And there was a recent discussion around one particular internal product, that should it go into the legal system seminar or not. And I said, no, it should not. Why? Because what you've done is you've summarized well-known knowledge, you've not said something new. Okay, that is something that we do, and I feel that it's a very healthy thing to put pressure on the entire internal team. That if you're going to write something, be new. So, it's a college project to read 20 things and summarize them. But here, I would like to challenge everybody that come up with something new, come up with a new idea that did not exist in this universe until it flashed into your brain.
Sure, but why are you blocking the communication? I mean, there could be benefits for that.
Yeah, I mean, there can be a little bit of that. But to make progress in the journey of knowledge, to make progress in the Indian development project, we need to do many, many new. We can't make do with the old. So the journey of the Indian development project lies in many important new insights into what is going on in the country, and many decisions that various actors will make about what to do differently. And so there is a great journey of new, and we specialize in the new. Okay, so we are a primary knowledge production organization. So as I said, there is the education and foreign journals piece, there is a consulting piece, and then there is organizations like us. We do primary knowledge production shaped by the great questions of the age in India, and we will ask what are the most important questions in India, and we want to say something new. We want to add value with new knowledge and new insight on the important questions of the age in India. And so both on our choice of questions and on the ways in which we will answer these questions, it doesn't have a close correspondence with the foreign journals. And so that's what's distinctive, that we're not solving the puzzle of what can I get to the journals. We're solving the puzzle here. We're in India. What are the important questions in India? And what are the new things and important ways in which we can make progress on understanding this country better, and ultimately in a way to help important communities in India rethink their life and do better. But that involves pushing on the word novel. So I am endlessly pushing on the word novel, that you need to know everything about everything. Everything is everything. You need to know everything about everything. You need to know everything that other people have written. You need to do your lit survey. Like hanging out on Google Scholar has to be your life, and you have to know all that other people have done. Fine. But then you got to do something new. You got to come up with some new things that nobody else has figured out, and that is the word novel. And I think of it as a very important milestone and a contribution where we add value to the world because we figure out things that others have not figured out. Okay, now coming to the ways in which that plays out and the kinds of things, I already talked through that whole package of knowledge and capabilities in XKDR forum. So I think we are good on knowing about data and taking data seriously, not just something that will suffice to get through the journal referees, because journal referees are very low standards on data sets, but deeply understanding data and its strengths and limitations on what is well measured and what is not well measured in India, then on the whole statistics and computer science toolkit of how to work with the data and have a rich quantitative and a grounded empirical understanding of the country. That is one piece, and that often adds value and ends up saying new things, because some of these basic things are often not done. And then you go to the economics. We are steeped in economics. Economics is a great and distinctive view of the world. Economists understand a few things. Economists understand incentives and maximization, that individuals maximize their pleasure and their utility. Firms maximize profit. Government agencies maximize arbitrary power. These are great tools to understand the world. Economists understand the price system, the magic of prices that move, prices as information, prices that transmit information to every player in the society, prices as the commanding heights of the economy that reshape the working of the private sector towards high efficiency and productivity. Social scientists and humanities scholars know public choice theory, the deep intuition and understanding that the individuals inside government are self-interested maximizers, that government is not benign, government is not a maibap, government is a bunch of self-interested people pursuing their own interests. And then you get to the toolkit of modern political science and public administration, which is around checks and balances and organizational design and formal documents of laws, of rules, of process manuals, of transparency, through which you could create the check and balance that creates conditions that are conducive for the emergence of state capability. All this is a nice toolkit, and I wish everybody in India will learn it, because it is just amazing how nice it is as a toolkit. But it is our toolkit, and we find that in field after field after field, when we turn around and apply our mind, we are able to add value, we are able to make novel. Okay, so you may have seen our work on the legal system. Okay, so there are many lawyers in India, but we add value in thinking about the legal system because we bring this whole toolkit to how to think about the legal system, that when we put the legal system under our microscope, we add value, we say something new. We started working in the field of climate change. You would know about Akshay Jaitley, who is co-founder at Trilegal, also co-founder at Trustbridge. He and I began many years promising each other that, the greatest problem in India is climate change, that we really need to devote our lives to understanding this deeply and adding value in India on helping the country navigate that nightmare that is coming. And so we started, and bit by bit we are chipping away at building that knowledge, building the literature, building the community. And our distinctive value add is the commitment to India, to look at the reality in India, not be shaped by funders, but to pursue that knowledge and bring this whole tool chain to bear on understanding those problems. And so on. I could go on in other fields, but I'm just giving you a flavor of the reason why novel is so important and how we manage to chip away in field after field after field. We have been consistently able to open up new fields, develop capabilities in new fields, and add value in each field compared to what is well known and mainstream in the country.
Here I would like to zoom out a little bit.
Yes.
And go from understanding or your emphasis on your organization being novel,
yes,
to go from how do we solve the Indian development problem.
Yes.
Because to my mind, I know that the one place that India still lacks heavily on the Indian policy story is execution.
Yes.
A lot of knowledge that we already know has been tried and tested abroad, and we can fairly be confident that it will work, doesn't work here because of execution. So zooming out, do you think the importance has to be on executing ideas that we know work decently, or like producing novel knowledge? Because I think to me that's a trade-off that maybe a lot of us aren't sure on.
Yeah. So you have said two things. I want to say three things. Okay. So first is that transplantation from abroad unfortunately works quite poorly on most practical things. So I feel the high ideas of enlightenment values and checks and balances and liberal democracy and price system, these port well. The detail doesn't port well. So, if you read Western blogs on data protection and try to do data protection in India, you'll often go wrong, you'll go badly wrong. There are many, many things going on in advanced economies that don't port to India. Kelkar and I have a phrase that we like. We propose the phrase invisible infrastructure. Okay, so imagine that you go on a field visit at a primary health center in France. And as a health expert, you will see a lot of detail about how the primary health center works. And you'll say, wow, this primary health center really works. And in the class of OECD countries, France has a good health system. And you might like to transplant some of that knowledge in the health domain, saying, this is how we should do a primary health center. The problem is that what the health expert sees as the manuals, the processes, the operations, maybe even the governance of the primary health center in France is not the whole story. There is an enormous secret sauce going on which shapes that field, which is not in the field of health. So for example, why should an employee of a French primary health center show up to work every day on time? That takes you into civil service HR. HR is a different field. A health person doesn't see HR. But HR in government in France is the invisible infrastructure that is shaping the way in which a certain policy package in health plays out and manages to work successfully in France. Okay? And the moment I've started saying this now, I hope when you open your eyes and you'll think a little more, suddenly you'll realize there is a whole array of subterranean capabilities in France, which includes HR and government contracting and liability and the legal system, and all these come together and they are the invisible infrastructure that make the narrow policy of the French health system in a primary health center work out correctly. So because the Indian invisible infrastructure is so different from that of any advanced economy, a lot of transplantation at the level of the implementation details in any field don't work correctly. And so I feel that high principles port. Okay, so if you say freedom, liberal democracy, dispersion of power, checks and balances, freedom of press, freedom of expression, separation of powers, okay, all these high ideas, enlightenment values, 17th century political science being brought here into India, I feel that works. Like these port correctly into India, but their translation into detail in India has to be thought of from scratch here. Okay, so this is my first set of claims. And then that takes me to the question of high ideas and execution. I think both the high ideas and the execution are gaps in India, and they are things that should be put into the discussion. So as an example, it was high ideas that gave us the reforms of 1991 that created a growth episode from 1991 to 2011. Okay, so if you think political economy, there's a bunch of firms in India who are getting the protection of 100% customs duty, of a 200% customs duty. And every practical person will say, oh, the political economy, it's all locked up. There are private rich people who are benefiting, controlling a company where foreign competition is blocked, and the private companies collude with the politicians, with the bureaucrats. Everything is great for the politician, for the bureaucrat, for the private company, and it is the Indian people who get screwed in the process, but the political economy is locked up and you can't change it. Okay, so a lot of the field of political economy is that kind of nihilistic complaint that because there are some beneficiaries and we understand farmers in Punjab and PDS and the politicians, I can describe that lock-in where all these interests are tied together, and so nothing can be done. But lo and behold, we did get some things done. We did get a revolution in Indian openness where customs duties went down dramatically, and that was done by high ideas, and it can only be done by high ideas. Practical people can't prize these things open. It is only high ideas that have the possibility of changing the country in a deeper way. And it is our failure on high ideas that whole journey of integrating India into globalization actually petered out. And in many other aspects, we in India remain as autarkic and anti-foreigner and prickly about the world as we were before. And in many respects, trade barriers have started coming back. And all that is the failure of high ideas. So my first claim to you is that fundamental progress is made out of high ideas. Okay, Gandhiji and Nehru invented some high ideas. The entire INC community invented some high ideas. It was ideas that made the British Empire pack up and leave. It was not guns. Okay, it was high ideas of Gandhiji and Nehru and Patel and Tagore and so on, who were just powerless people sitting in jail. Okay, Nehru spent 7 years in jail or whatever. And it was their ideas. The Discovery of India is one of the most important books in India's history. It was an idea. So I will always affirm ideas. There are high ideas that create the whole philosophy around which practical people operate. And to become a great country, we need to nurture that process of creating high ideas. When you don't have high ideas, you're down to day-to-day practical things. You'll just live within the box. People will just be hand-wringing and complaining that, fertilizer subsidy, PDS, free power, taking out water, green revolution, Punjab, Haryana, we keep on saying the same things for 20 years, you'll never fix that. Okay, or capital controls. India is a poor country. We have to be like a developing country. We have to have solidarity with other developing countries. All those kinds of things. Take foreign policy, take military affairs. Each of these is trapped in wrong ideas, bad ideas. India is a poor country because the ideas are wrong. And wrong. We are filled with wrong ideas all across the Indian landscape. And our journey as a country requires that we have to change the ideas, and that requires many acts of imagination and invention and coming up with novel ideas. Okay, so I think ideas are very important, and the story of ideas is far from finished. We've just about begun. That I feel for the first time now there is an interesting knowledge community, and we've got some of our basics right. Separately we can talk about that, but I'm very optimistic about the Indian journey. I think there is a beginning in doing India right in the last 10-20 years, and I'm optimistic that we're making progress in a way that for many years we were not. But that's a separate long story, maybe for another day. Finally, I come to execution. Okay, so it is fashionable and popular to say in India that we make fine laws but we don't implement them. Okay, and I actually think that's completely wrong. I think that state failure happens in India because of the wrong ideas, because the laws are drafted wrong. Okay, and that goes to public choice theory, that when you give unlimited powers, when you give sweeping powers to government agencies, are you surprised that the individuals will go abuse those powers? So when state agencies have high arbitrary power, then it just becomes a process of destruction of their capabilities. Power corrupts, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And then state agents will pursue their own personal objectives and not fulfill the organizational objectives. You're back to the kind of conversation we were having earlier about big organizations. So let me tell one story where I happened to be an observer. I had no role in that story, but for me it was a great learning ground. And then let me carry it through to its conceptual and logical implementation. There were great heroes of the Indian financial reform who in the early 1990s led to the creation of SEBI. Okay, so Surendra Dave was the founding chairman of a non-statutory SEBI, and he surrounded himself with the most amazing team in the world you could ask for. It was Ravi Narayan, Chitra Ramakrishna, Raghavan Putran, who died recently, Nagesh. Okay, he just chose the best people from IDBI to go with him to start SEBI, and they started researching what is the concept of a securities regulator. They wrote the first draft of the law. This began in 1988, and for 4 years nothing happened. And then in 1992, after the Harshad Mehta scandal, the parliament got its act together and passed a version of the SEBI Act with small modifications from what they had done. Okay, so these are wonderful people, brilliant people, and they got India on the journey of building a proper financial system. And by the way, you will recognize the names Ravi Narayan, Chitra Ramakrishna with R.H. Patil went on to create NSE, and that is just one of the most important milestones in the history of Indian finance. The creation of NSE, the NSE Clearing Corporation, the NSDL, these were breakthrough moments for the history of India's financial system, and these are the people who did that. And as you can see, I love these people, I admire these people, but the ideas were wrong. Okay, their worldview was one where SEBI is built and run by good people like themselves. Okay, so their worldview was that the goodness of Surendra Dave and Ravi Narayan and Chitra Ramakrishna will infuse and imbue SEBI forever, and that theory was wrong. The correct theory of political science or public administration is public choice theory, is a way of thinking about government organizations around the words checks and balances. That government organizations work not because you hire good people into them, not because they are run by saints, but because they're surrounded by good checks and balances. And that brings me to the subject of SEBI orders and appeals against SEBI orders. So in 1995, there was one Hindustan Lever insider trading case, and Hindustan Lever felt that the order was unfair and they wanted to appeal. Okay, so one of the loveliest stories in India's history began around this appeal by Hindustan Lever against the SEBI order. At that time, the way the SEBI Act was drafted by Surendra Dave, Ravi Narayan, Chitra Ramakrishna, Nagesh, okay, all good people, my friends, I admire them, I love them, but their knowledge was wrong, their theory was wrong. The way the SEBI Act was drafted, the appeal against a SEBI order went to the Secretary, Department of Economic Affairs, okay, who at the time was Montek Ahluwalia. And at the time, the Secretary, Department of Economic Affairs was a member of the SEBI board. Okay, now this is self-dealing, that how can a part of SEBI hear an appeal against an action of SEBI? Okay, so there was a hearing in room 131 at North Block where Montek was sitting at the head of the table. On one side of the table were employees of SEBI who were the authors of the order, and at the other side of the table were representatives of Hindustan Lever, represented by a brilliant young lawyer called Arun Jaitley. Okay, and the proceedings were about to begin, and Arun Jaitley did grandstanding. He said, this proceeding is illegal. Okay, this proceeding is unconstitutional. How dare you, Mr. Montek Ahluwalia, Secretary DEA, hear an appeal against your organization where you are a board member? This violates the Constitution of India, and we're going to take this up at the Supreme Court. Okay, and they did, and then there was an agreement. A DEA agreed that they would establish an appeals capability for SEBI that is constitutionally sound, which is the Securities Appellate Tribunal. Okay, nice story. Now you see you're on the correct path. The theory is becoming correct. The political science and public administration is coming into focus around a correct model. This is where I say the theory is wrong, the knowledge is wrong in a lot of places. This is the first glimmer of the better knowledge emerging in India, that if you have an organization like SEBI, which is just absolutely amazing and I think borderline unconstitutional, in combining legislative, executive and judicial branches within one government organization in violation of the separation of powers doctrine, which is in the basic structure of the Constitution. Okay, so this was a wrong thing done by the founding people of SEBI. But one by one now, We need to understand these things, that there's such a thing as separation of powers and what you're doing is entirely wrong. Anyway, back to story. So the law was amended and SAT was created. The first presiding officer of SAT was Achyutan, who came from the Ministry of Law. And for the first N numbers of the appeals that came to SAT, Achyutan threw out the SEBI order, struck down the SEBI order on the grounds that it's not a reasoned order. SEBI can't just write that we hereby fine 2 crore rupees upon so and so because they wear a blue shirt to work, okay, which was the kind of power SEBI had at the time. And after being slapped repeatedly in the face, then SEBI started developing higher capabilities about how to do an investigation and how to do an order so that it can be defended at SAT. And that's the journey to capability inside SEBI. Okay, and the reason I'm telling you all this is that's how laws get implemented. Laws get implemented, policy projects in India get implemented when we bring this full skepticism about checks and balances, public choice theory, and organizational design to bear on government organizations. And the reason India is poor is because we don't have all this. So it is a failure of ideas, and yeah, of course you need plenty of execution, but it is trivial to see that when you give a great deal of power inside a variety of Indian organizations, it's just going to degenerate into a mess.
I think it's really important what you said, that execution, I mean, you can execute the wrong ideas and then you're going to get the wrong outcomes.
Correct. So I think that there is a great journey of ideas and high knowledge waiting to be done on India's hoped for journey, that in the next 100 years, will we become an advanced economy? Will we become as great as the UK? Okay, the jury is out. We don't know that it will happen. It's not baked in. Very few countries succeed in their development journeys. Most countries that have embarked on a development journey in the post Second World War period thus far have failed. They have not become advanced economies. So I would not say it's in the bag. It's a question. And that question turns on high ideas. Are we able to create the high ideas that will infuse this republic and create a better society?
This brings me to, I mean, I'm just circling back to what you had said some time ago in terms of disseminating a lot of this knowledge. I mean, I think you're doing a really good job at producing primary knowledge, but then the second and follow-up question is, how do we disseminate it so that it can have, say, quote unquote, real life impact? I have two questions for that. One, have you been successful, or do you even want to be outcome agnostic? I find it hard to believe, because I would assume that as a researcher you want these ideas to have effect in these places, but at the same time it's something you can't control. Secondly, how do you effect change sitting from where you are? That's an outcome you want, that's an outcome you can't control. How do you strike the balance in your head?
So when we start thinking about something as grand as the Republic of India and 1.4 billion people, we have to be very, very grounded and humble and realistic about the word change. Okay, it is impossibly hard to shake this super tanker. Okay, this is a giant country, it is a great country, and the process of change is mysterious and involves many, many players. So, I feel each of us, we should hold ourselves accountable for ourselves, and we know what we do, and it is a process and an input oriented journey that we make some offerings and we put them up on the altar of human knowledge, and beyond that you have no right to ask for any outcomes. Okay, so I feel that's a healthy and grounded way to do it. That said, I feel like I've tried to work on many, many fields. We in XKDR have tried to work on many, many fields, and in a couple of places the ideas are good and they have gained currency, they've become increasingly mainstream, and I don't like to claim success because I feel it's just not a good thing to do. The country is impossibly complicated, and we could just be fatuous fools in claiming that I did it. So I don't think you should say I did it. But I can see many, many areas where things are getting better, where the knowledge and the mainstream views in the country are shifting, and there is a journey of ideas. To circle back around your dissemination question, how can you disseminate to 1.4 billion people? You can't. So nobody can control these things, and I feel what we can do is to put in our best efforts. Also, there is a whole ecosystem of ideas and their dissemination and their communication and their transmission and their acceptance, or the debate, the public debate. Some ideas win, some ideas lose. There's a whole great ecosystem around it, and nobody can control it. So what you can do is put up your humble offerings on the altar of knowledge. So we write some blog articles, we write some working papers, we put out some videos, periodically get invited to do some public lectures, attend some conferences, do some talks. Okay, so then the ideas have to find wings and fly on their own. And over the years, I feel that there are some areas where we're making progress, but in all those areas, I have no doubt we are pebbles in an avalanche. That there was a much bigger journey of the Indian society where people were thinking about all the same questions. Many people, many minds better than mine, have applied themselves to the same questions. So this SEBI SAT story is actually well known. A lot of people know about this story. I got all this knowledge insight from other people, and then I have adopted it, and I'm telling you such a cool story. So I didn't invent this story. So like that, there are many people working, and over time it will become better. I've been struck by the evolution of Supreme Court jurisprudence around regulation. Okay. So there is a 1999 order about Clariant International versus SEBI, where SEBI passed an order against Clariant International, and I seem to think that Clariant International sued at SAT and then at the Supreme Court on the question of separation of powers or some such thing. That how can there be a hearing inside SEBI? It's like, this is nonsense. You're a part of the executive. How can you perform a judicial function? Okay. And the Supreme Court says, yeah, we see the point, but for now we let it go. Okay. And I think that reflected the state of knowledge in India at the time. Knowledge of political science, of law, of public choice theory was weak in India at the time. And this is how people will find that, oh, Sarkar is a good thing, no? SEBI are good people, so we'll give them all the power. So you fuse legislative, executive and judicial functions all into SEBI, it's okay. And much later we start seeing the Supreme Court apply its mind on the working of regulators in more and more skeptical ways. So on RBI and cryptocurrencies, on some things that the Airports Economic Regulatory Authority did. Now the Supreme Court has started pushing, saying, no, you have too much arbitrary power. Now show me due process. Why did you do this? Did you do public consultation? Where is your democratic legitimacy? Now the Supreme Court has started asking questions and pushing better functioning of the regulators in small limited ways. And that is how a country makes progress, that ideas shift, the climate of opinion shifts, and then bit by bit many players, many actors start doing different things. So for example, when Dr. Sahu became the first chairman of the IBBI, which is a regulator, he is actually the person who in 2012 first started waking up all of us, saying that this separation of powers is a serious problem inside the regulators. I did not think of it myself. I was not competent enough in the world of philosophy and political economy to have understood this by myself. I got this knowledge from Sahu. When Sahu became the chairman of IBBI, he created an internal vertical where the quasi-judicial functions are insulated from the legislative and the executive functions, so that it has better hygiene vis-a-vis separation of powers. When we worked on the drafting of the Insolvency and Bankruptcy Code, we put in a whole bunch of sections based on FSLRC, which improve the checks and balances inside IBBI, and you'll be delighted to know that the DEA and the legislative department threw them all out, saying, oh, what is all this? Again, it's knowledge that the DEA and the legislative department at the time did not know how to think about what is a regulator, what are checks and balances, what is FSLRC. And so this opportunity for drafting a better law governing regulators was lost. Okay, so I think the line from ideas to action should never be done in a childish way, saying, I did this. Rather, it is something grand that happens on the scale of a society. And what each of us should do is that work on it with sincerity and devotion, and then put up our offerings on the altar of knowledge. And after that, if the ideas are good and if more people will read them, talk about them, and the world of high ideas will never be a high volume thing. Most people will live a life of Bollywood and cricket, and that's okay.
So I think you have more or less become outcome agnostic.
Correct. That I don't define success as getting X done. I feel that our contribution in this one life is to build knowledge and help some people in their growth journey and keep trying to disseminate knowledge and be useful in some ways, and that's a good thing.
Here, I would like to resurface the conversation we were having earlier when I asked you, how do you make sure that you don't trouble yourself every day on like an almost daily basis, that this is another day where I haven't changed the world, this is another day where I haven't changed the world.
Yeah. If you set yourself the goal of anything involving the word I, then you're in trouble, because you'll always be unhappy. And the world is infinitely complex, and the universe is indifferent to our pleasure. So you should not go down that route. It's a path for misery. Instead, we should run hard on a culture that we are able to create and define for ourselves. And I've tried to describe many elements of that culture. It is a intellectual culture. It's a world of knowledge. It is a world of caring about the Indian development journey and being enthusiastic and vigorous in pursuing knowledge and building community. And that's what we have the power to do. That's what we have the ability to do. That's what we should do. And beyond that, what happens in the world is something vastly more complex. For the rest, we are pebbles in an avalanche.
That makes sense. I think I have one last question with respect to, say, the work and the policy work, and then I'll switch to some random questions that I have curated. But having said all of this and having figured this, one thing that I like that has struck me about you, and I remember this, we were having this conversation in Karjat. You said you wake up every day and it takes 1 second for your brain to boot and you're ready to go. You're ready to think through problems. How have you been able to do that at this stage of your life? What is the secret sauce?
I'm just enthusiastic. It's like I love life. I love the world. I love all the things that are happening. I'm enthusiastic to do more and learn more and keep thinking. Also, I think clean living. Okay, so I am zero drugs my whole life, zero alcohol, zero tobacco, and I prioritize sleep. So the flip side of what I said to you is that when I'm sleepy, I go to sleep. I will not have a coffee. I will sleep. So I'm generally well slept. So then it's just like basic health. That when I finish sleeping, I wake up, I'm fully energetic and ready to roll. And I'm enthusiastic that, oh wow, what a fun thing. We have so many things to do today. Let's go run and do them.
Makes sense. What role does hiking play in your life?
I love to go into the mountains. I think they're a higher place. I think we see something bigger than ourselves. And it's great to be in touch with nature, to be in touch with the plants, to be in touch with the high mountains. The physicality, that ascetic mode of putting one step after another to climb 1,000 meters in the day, of 30,000 steps, of just handling yourself and your body through that. I just find it to be a great experience.
Do you think better, or do you think at all?
Yeah, I think a lot on hikes. I think very well on hikes. I am blessed that I typically have amazing people with me on hikes. So it's also a platform for amazing conversations.
I think I've asked a version of this question to you earlier, but when you look back at your life, do you think you've made bad decisions? And what do you think about them?
Yeah, I made plenty bad decisions. You sprung this question to me without warning last time, and I said something about Kirit Parikh. As an aside, right in these chairs, I got a long conversation with Kirit Parikh. And in that conversation, I told him that story. I said, Divyanshu was interviewing me and he said this and I said this. So yeah, I'm sure I made many bad decisions, but I don't beat myself up about it, because that's life. Okay, life is infinitely complex. Okay, we try our best, and as long as you're a good, sincere person and you have some good intentions, you'll get some things right, but you will undoubtedly get some things wrong. Hindsight is 50-50. So imagine if I get you into a time machine and you go to 1955 and see the newspaper with stock prices, and you say, wow, I can make so much money buying these stocks. Like, what's the point? Because you don't have a time machine, you can't go back. So I operate very much on like the economist-y notion of a sunk cost fallacy, that don't look back. What's done is done. Whatever things happened in the past, they're done. Now look forward. Can we be constructive? Can we make progress? And I think a lot around how to find the energy and the morale and the enthusiasm to keep going and be useful and stay enthusiastic and help others and grow the body of knowledge. That's the one thing we know how to do. I do not have a millennial conception. I mean millennial in a different sense from millennials. I do not have a millennial conception and inevitability that the Indian development project will succeed. And I think that is a superpower. I treat the Indian development project as contingent upon the good behavior of thousands and thousands of people. So I think thousands and thousands of people have to literally volunteer their lives and do good things in order to make a country work. And so I feel that it keeps you grounded that this stuff is very hard and there are no guarantees. Whereas if you slip into the notion that development is inevitable, then you feel that, oh, it doesn't matter, I could do anything and I could get away with it and it's okay. Whereas I think that development is contingent and it requires a lot of good people to create a culture and to create the knowledge around which a good country can come together.
And I agree, and I think I was speaking to someone else very recently, and this is a notion that I ironically find more in entrepreneurs, because I think they understand it better, because they have to do this work on a day-to-day basis, that if you don't very carefully select for an outcome, it won't come, the future won't come, and development won't happen by itself. When was the last time you were wrong about something?
I've been wrong about plenty of things. I was wrong about the COVID second wave. It really hurts, it really rankles. I thought that it was largely finished and I was wrong, and it really rankles how horrendously wrong I was, and I had not understood the situation correctly. Maybe nobody did, but for me personally it rankles. I didn't see the second wave coming, and I was one of the people that was relatively optimistic that by and large, we're doing okay, herd immunity is setting in, and I was wrong.
What is the biggest thing you've been wrong about?
The biggest thing I was wrong about was the sense in 1989 when the Berlin Wall fell that this planet is now on an amazing journey of beauty and truth and prosperity, that we are finished with the madness of populism and communism and Nazism and nationalism and religion and all that, and now everything is going to be good, that now good, happy, healthy liberal democracies will flourish all over the world. And I was wrong.
What did you not see?
I just failed to see how the religious, nationalistic, authoritarian, dictatorial backlash would come.
When you're in a dilemma, how do you solve?
One is that I don't worry too much about dilemmas. I know I'll pick one, and it's not as if the fate of the world is on the line. Okay, so there's yes, there are two paths you can go on, but there is time to come back and do things differently. So it's not that life shaking. I have learned a new trick. So when I was small, I think I used to have this self-image that I'm so smart, I can figure out things quickly, and like on the spot I would figure out stuff and I would come up with an answer quickly. Now I'm very comfortable saying to people, I don't know. I think that's a great superpower. So it's a great thing to be able to say it to other people on their face, I don't know. And I say, let me think about it. So it takes me time to think about it, which is a good thing. And I find sleeping over something makes it better. So when you sleep over it, I feel you wake up much more clear. I find that more systematically, it's nice to charge the mind with a problem and then sleep over it. Then when you wake up, you're always more clear. So as an example, my favorite way of writing a business standard column is that by night, I like to have the column idea in my head, and I'll try to think about it. I'll try to do 1 or 2 phone calls around it. So that on Sunday morning, when I wake up, I've slept over an idea, and that I think generates the best 1,000-word article.
What do you think are the most common fallacies young people fall for? And by young people, I mean like well-meaning, bright young people.
The fallacy of the importance of status and competition and performance. So people are living a performative life where you put your life up on social media and you want to look better than your peers. It's just a bloody waste. It's like, why bother? You have to lead a good life. It doesn't matter what others are doing. Okay, every mother would bring up a child saying, don't envy other people, you care about yourself. And that's related to that competitive spirit that we judge based on how others are doing. And like, why? Just judge on how you are doing. And the whole role of status and celebrity and fame in modern life is just completely warped.
And did experience and age lead you to shed it, or?
No, these are very much my learning that I I used to be much more competitive than before. Luckily, I never bought into the notions of fame, status, success, and money of the world. I was always intellectually oriented. For me, the heroes were the thinkers and the people in the world of learning. But I also learned to liberate myself that this person has a Nobel Prize. Those kinds of things don't mean anything to me anymore. I'm no longer reverential about other people. I don't care about whether a Nobel Prize winner has written something. No, I will think it from scratch.
What are your favorite heuristics to think about life?
Breadth is underrated. So modern society and specialization and exams and careers pushes us into specialization. Actually, a nice superpower is breadth. So if you know many, many things, it's great. And in a very deep way, there are analogies we bring across fields. So across the vast breadth of knowledge, the human mind sees something there and sees something there and is able to pluck an analogy and take it to an unrelated thing. So I think breadth is underrated and breadth is far more valuable than is made out to be. Finally, what matters is understanding the world, not being a neurosurgeon. Okay, so it can be a trade to be a narrow specialist. Okay, you can climb a corporate ladder on being a specialist. You can get your journal pubs and become a narrow academic, climbing one different kind of social ladder in that specialization. But the great drama of the world, the great entertainment industry of the world is understanding the world. And understanding the world requires breadth. Narrow specialists are not good at understanding the world. So breadth is underrated and nobody is telling you to achieve breadth. Everybody is drumming it into your head, saying run some race, be competitive, be narrow, focus, specialize, become an expert in one thing. So I will say to you, yeah, of course, you should specialize and become an expert on one thing, but then you should become an expert on 20 things and you should become a dabbler on 40 things, because then you have the vast breadth of the world and it's just more fun and it's interesting to live like that because you're learning so much and you will have friends in all those fields and disciplines. You will lead a rich life, but also it is the path to insight.
Do you ever feel FOMO? You ever feel you're missing out on something?
Not particularly. I'm happy with what I'm doing. I'm thrilled. I get to climb mountains. I get to think.
And this is like the last couple of questions I have, because I think this is again another conversation we were having in Karjat, where you told me that, and I was asking you, what do you think I should do? I have these years ahead of me. I have the privilege of being in my 20s. You said you have to develop thinking capabilities when the Indian development story or when the Indian state needs you, you're equipped to contribute. Can you expand on that? What do you mean by that?
Yeah. There's a poem by Milton where Milton, who was blind, is saying to the Lord that I wish to serve, and what the hell, what did you do? You sent me into this world as a blind person and I am powerless and I'm not able to serve you. And God replies, they also serve who stand and wait. And I think that's the way to think about the Indian development journey, that in the life of the country, people, capabilities become valuable at different points in time, and you never know what that point in time will be, and you shouldn't approach it as a careerist. If you start thinking, I want to be chief economic advisor, there's something wrong in your character. But instead, you should approach it in a spirit of service that will build knowledge, will build capabilities. At the right time, if things go right in the Indian development journey, then there will be a wonderful need and application of amazing specialized blocks of knowledge.
And so basically what I interpret it as is that you don't, I mean, if you have goals, sure, go ahead and do it, but don't let goals dictate what you want to do. You have to focus on knowledge building, so that, and as like through this conversation, there have been many instances when you told about how opportunities have come up to people that they couldn't foresee. And one such a couple of those opportunities will come to you, and then you'll get to.
Yeah, but I'll also say this in a different way, that you're young, longevity is going up. So the word health span is used, is different from lifespan. So you're young and you have a very high lifespan in front of you, also a very high health span. Health span is your healthy years. So the interesting question to ask yourself is, how do you stay hungry? How do you stay foolish? I'm stealing the words from Steve Jobs. And if you organize yourself around practical goals, then the danger is you will achieve them. And then what is left to live for? Whereas if you find the culture and character whereby you find life satisfaction in higher things, in being part of something bigger than yourself, then you will be able to run hard and be happy and, challenge yourself and push yourself for a very, very long time and keep learning in a supremely changing world. So I think that's a selfish set of arguments why it is better for us to organize ourselves around a culture of knowledge and service rather than goal direction.
And I completely agree, because I think at the end of the day, it'll serve your own inner purpose of wanting to contribute to something, and hopefully one day or one instance or one conversation will be helpful to people.
Yeah.
Thank you so much, Ajay. This was a wonderful conversation.
Thanks, Divyanshu.